This is what your college major says about you. Told from me. For reference, I went to law school and now I make stupid YouTube videos on the internet, so look how that turned out. If you study English literature, you self-identify as a former gifted child in high school that like burnt out, and you love telling people how bad at math you are. You love lamenting about how you never read anymore and you wish you had the passion and the joy for reading like you did when you were a kid. And yeah, I think maybe part of that might be true, but also, have you considered that books written for adults tend to be harder to read than books written for kids? That tends to be the trend, that the words are like usually longer, the books are usually a little thicker. That tends to be what happens. If you studied psychology, I'm gonna be honest, the vibe I get from people who study psychology is you didn't really know what you wanted to study, and psychology is like what you do when you're not sure what you want to do but you're in college anyway. When people that don't study psychology ask you what you study and you say psychology, you like to think that we think that you're psychoanalyzing us and know everything about human behavior, when in reality no one thinks you know how to do that. Oh, I do psychology. I bet you probably think I'm psychoanalyzing you, but that's a stereotype. We can't do that. Yeah, don't worry, chief. No one thinks you know how to do that. We're mostly just worried you're gonna ask us to fill in another questionnaire for another study that you're doing for the 15th time this term. If you study education, the only people that I know that study education hate kids, which is terrifying. What the pick literally anything else. I don't know if I feel sorry for you or for the kids. Probably the kids. If you studied veterinary science, you grew up with a ton of pets and you feel like you have a real special connection with animals, and you do. Which is why you were actually the worst person to do veterinary science, because when you picked your major, you failed to account for the fact that being a vet is like 80% putting animals down. If you study finance, y'all actually wear like gilets and vests every day, but you can do better. You don't have to be your stereotype. You don't have to do that. Okay, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. This is not you. I believe you can do better. Okay, you can do it. Please, stop. You don't have to wear the gilet every day. I know you really want to, but other types of clothing exist. You can buy some, okay? It's okay. If you study biology, you like to think that you're better than the other degrees because you're STEM, but in reality, your job is just about as employable as any other humanities/liberal arts degree. And you love barely making your month's rent working as a lab tech. And your livelihood is essentially contingent on whether or not your last name shows up in a research paper that only about 15 other people who also specialize in your particular niche biology field will ever read. If you study biology with no desire to become a doctor, if I introduce you to my Asian mom, she'll be like, oh, cool, are you doing pre-medicine? And then I'll have to say, no, it's not pre-med, mom. Some people just like to study science with no desire to become a doctor. And then she won't understand, and the next time I bring you up to her, she'll forget, and she'll be like, oh, cool, is that pre-med? And I'll be like, no, it's not pre-med, mom. Some people just like studying science with no desire to become a doctor, like you asked me last time. If you study chemistry, I don't know any subset of people that loves looking at the meme pages of their own major as much as chemistry students do. Like, y'all unironically love those corny ass chemistry memes, and you'll like unironically to yourself be like, ha ha ha, oh my god, that's so true, that's chemistry students. If you're doing chemistry with no desire to become a doctor, if I introduce you to my Asian mom, she'd be like, oh cool, is that pre-medicine? And then I'll have to say, no, it's not pre-med, mom. Some people just like to study science with no desire to become a doctor. And she won't understand, and the next time I bring you up, I just did this bit. If you're doing pre-med/medicine, I bet you thought that my mom really wanted me to go into medicine, but you'd actually be wrong. She actually does care about my mental health somewhat. Also, this is gonna be so controversial, and I'm actually terrified of saying this, so I'm gonna preface this by saying that like anything I've ever done is useless and infinitesimally insignificant in comparison to what med students and doctors do, and they can like spit on me and call me worthless waste of space in comparison, and they would be right. But also, low-key, I feel like people overstate how you have to be like super smart to be in medicine, because I feel like the most important defining thing about being a med student is just the fact that you're the only group of people okay with spending 30 hours in the library every day memorizing stuff. If you study dentistry, you guys make a lot of money, but it comes at the cost of having to hover over some old guy's mouth and like poke around in there and like rinse and repeat 9 hours a day for 30 years. My mom wanted me to go into dentistry, but I was like, there's no amount of money in the world that is going to make me do that. I don't care how well paid it is. If you study political science, okay, this is going to get very, very upsetting. Okay, controversial, okay, layman's opinion. Based on my observations of people in political science, 3 main divisions. The Also, y'all love a conspiracy documentary, like the aliens and like you love that. It's not even like related to politics. Like you don't even necessarily believe what they're saying in the conspiracy documentary, but like you just love content that's like speaking to you in a conspiratorial way. And it's like, on September 9th, 1999, a call came into the local police department. Marge Delaney, a resident of the small town of Maple Ridge, reported that she had heard banging noises coming from her neighbor's house. When the detective finally checked the house, they found something that would haunt the town for decades. Like, you just like when people talk to you like that, so you love that. If you study physics, every physics student I've ever met is like, oh my god, I got 40% on my quiz. 40%? That's terrible. I'm so sorry. Terrible. 40%? This is incredible. I must be like top 3 in the class. If you study law, there are 2 types. Number 1, you're really passionate about justice and you want to help those in need, and you want to like do a lot of pro bono and work in family or criminal law or environmental law. Second type, you want to do corporate, you want to do commercial law, maybe your family does law, you like the prestige, you want to work at a big firm and be in suits and you want to make a lot of money. But for both of these, you converge in the fact that you're both of the same opinion that if I have a law degree, I'm never going to struggle with finding a job because at least it's going to be super stable, and you would be dead wrong. Because the only thing worse job market wise right now than law is computer science, at least where I live, because both are super saturated with people that are like, well, this job is going to be super stable, let me go into it, and now there are no jobs for none of us. None of us have any job opportunities. If you do computer science, you either make like 6 figures or you're totally broken, unemployed, and can't find a job because literally every other did computer science because they also thought that this was going to be super stable, like a really good idea, good way to make money. But then the market became incredibly saturated and you are stressed out. And you love going online and looking at those Reddit forums about comp sci and having random strangers online scold you and preach to you how you don't need a degree in comp sci. You should have just taught yourself to code in your own time and worked on your own projects, because employers only care about your projects anyway, so your degree is basically worthless. Moral of the story is your real mistake is you should have just taught yourself to code using online tutorials when you were 6 years old, but you didn't lock in and now you're here. Like, look what you did, okay? Look at you now. Look at you. If you did fine art, you probably think that you have a super unique fashion style and no one dresses like you, except for the fact that we can all guess that you study art. So actually, paradoxically, does that actually mean that you dress exactly like everyone else that studies fine art? Yeah, try arguing your way out of that one, motherfucker. Now I'm going to go through the subset of people within art. So if you studied game design, 50% of you thought this was too much work and you dropped out and you switched to animation. If you study animation, 50% of you thought this was too much work and you dropped out and you switched to graphic design. If you study graphic design, 50% of you thought this was too much work and you dropped out and you switched to illustration. If you study illustration, 50% of you thought this was too much work and you dropped out and you switched to painting. If you study painting, 50% of you thought this was too much work and you dropped out and you studied performance art. If you study theater/drama, I know a ton of people that studied theater and drama, and they're all like super social, super hardworking. They're always on time. They'll be there at like 8 or 9 on the dot, and they're willing to work for like 12-13 hours a day. Really good people to be friends with. They can talk to like anyone, super social, literally star of any room they walk into. They're also super duper unemployed, but they do it with a smile on their face. And they burst into song spontaneously if they study musical theater. They do actually do that. If you study film/film production, there are 2 types of people that study film, and they both hate each other. First type of film student is the one that hates the pretentious film student stereotype, and they like to introduce themselves as like a film student who's not pretentious and likes the blockbusters and wants to direct a huge Hollywood movie, and their favorite movies like Interstellar or Parasite or La La Land. And they're like, yeah, I don't like those pretentious film guys. That's not me. 8.5 was so boring, I couldn't watch it. These types of film students have a significant moral failing, which is that they fail to realize that in their anxiety about not being perceived as pretentious, they are actively engaging in anti-intellectualism, which isn't actually a good thing, and they've actually swung too far the other way, and this just makes them a bad film student by refusing to engage with material that is intellectually and historically significant to their industry and their craft. The second type of film student is the pretentious film student stereotype that you're thinking of, that refuses to use the word movie and refuses to watch anything remotely popular or well-known, and they want to make obscure art house films shot on 16mm only. They also have a significant moral failing, and that is the failure to realize that nobody likes them. If you study math, you guys have it the worst because you have all of the difficulty of being a STEM degree, but you also have to face all of the taunting and the ire from the other STEM degrees telling you your degree is worthless because it's too theoretical, therefore worthless like a non-STEM degree. If you study engineering, disregard everything I said previously that made you feel like I found certain majors more annoying than others, because there is nothing more annoying than an engineering student's ramble about how university is useless unless you studied STEM. You can literally turn this speech on and off like a sprinkler, but listen, engineering students, regardless of how much you hate me because you think that I'm an idiot and I would be a terrible engineering student, which is probably true, we have a lot more in common than you think. Namely, that we both love making huge sweeping statements about fields outside of our own claimed area of expertise. You like to blame your lack of friends and social life and your general awkwardness and terrible social skills, and that's partially true, but it's also because of your immense sense of superiority because you're in one of the hardest majors. If you study architecture, again, two types. Number one, you wanted to study art, but your parents didn't want you to study art, and so as a compromise, you picked architecture because that's kind of like art and you need to draw and be creative, and you lasted 1 semester, and then you dropped out because it turns out that doing something kind of similar to art but is not art is actually worse than picking something completely unrelated to art and then doing art in your free time because you have no free time when you do architecture. And the second type, you actually did want to study architecture, but you're always complaining about how much work you have to do, and that's true, but also at some point, y'all want to sleep on the dirty floor in the studio. Like, I know it's a lot of work, and it is, but like, some of you like it just a little bit. Like, you like telling people how much work you have and like how you have no free time. Like, it's a bragging right. Good luck if you have a friend that studies architecture because you're not going to see them. If you majored in a language, you change the language on your phone to the language that you're learning, and you cannot keep it to yourself. You're also choosing the school you're going to not based on the school itself, but based on what study abroad options they offered, and then you did that study abroad 2 years ago and you're still talking about it to this day. If you studied business, y'all hate how everyone tells you how easy your course is and they mock us. Look at they mock us. But I'm gonna have my own startup one day and my course isn't actually easy, okay? And you'd be right, because all degrees are hard in their own ways and they all have their own challenges. Some have more challenges than others. Or you were an athlete and you didn't know what to study in college because you came to college for football. If you study nursing, you love telling people about how actually the stereotype about sororities is totally wrong. It's actually a really supportive community and it's great for networking. I made all of my lifelong friends in my sorority, notwithstanding the fact that I had to pay $1,000 minimum each semester to hang out with my closest friends and true friends and sisters. Look at all the friendship bracelets we made each other, okay, that we wear and we trade when we go to the rave. I can't tell you what this tradition originated from because I'll be demonetized, but you can Google it yourself. If you studied classics, a beige sweater and turtleneck glasses does not make you dark academia. Every other in London wears these. You will never be Donna Tartt, Bacchanalian, dark academic. You are John Green, Pinterest board version, candlelit journaling. You're not a harbinger of chaotic intrigue. You just have executive dysfunction and you sit in your room a lot. If you study history, a lot of you dress very tangentially like the historical period that you're obsessed with. So like the girl that likes medieval witchcraft will like wear a modernized version of a witch with a black skirt and pentacle necklace, or like the guy that's hyper fixated on World War I will wear a tweed blazer with round glasses. If you study journalism, stop posting your journal articles on your Instagram story. I'm not gonna read them. If I'm gonna read about current events, I'm not gonna do it from the blog of a second-year journalism student, okay? I'm sorry. If you study music production, specifically, if you study music and you produce like rock or adjacent music like metal or punk, you'd then get dressed really alternative fashion-wise, but like a lot of the guys I met that do this, I found to like be kind of dorky. Like a lot of the guys are like, yeah, I make heavy metal music. They're like, they look like they work at the IT help desk. If you study environmental science, on the face of it, you are the chillest, healthiest, and happiest major. Environmental science majors are always doing something. Like they love hiking, rock climbing, camping on the weekends, team sports, but that's all a facade hiding the fact that they're actually the most deeply nihilistic people with crushing existential dread. If you study actuarial science, I bet you love explaining to people what that is. Aren't you impressed that I know what that is? You guys do like Brownian motion, risk, random processes. See, I know so many of the words. If you don't know what this is, don't worry about it. The only thing you need to know about this major is I was once talking to my friend who studied computer science about this guy that I knew that studied actuarial science, and the computer science guy was like, wow, that guy's a nerd. The computer science guy said that. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. If I offended you, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you, truly. And just remember that the uniting factor of all of the degrees is that you all think you're the most sleep deprived and hardest major to do, and in some way, you'd all be right. Except for business.